Well, the question on the minds of most Nigerians at this point would be, who is going to be our next president-elect? Well, as far as that issue is concerned, the chairman of the Independent National Electoral Commission, Professor Atahiru Jega, did explain exactly when the results of the polls, the final results, would be announced. Well, it appears a collation is going on in some parts of the country. In some parts, collation has been completed and results being announced, but we do not have the liberty to do that on this forum. We'll be keeping track of events as they have developed on, well, should I say, the second day of the elections in Nigeria as we moved into the third day. It's Sunday, March the 29th, 2015, and yesterday the polls held. There were so many issues trailing the conduct of the elections, particularly the issue of the card readers and, of course, well, matters of security, whether we had breaches of security here or there or not. And talking about security, well, sometimes it could get extremely overzealous because just today, our correspondent in Cross River State, Imani Joe Adinoyi, was assaulted along with our cameraman by some police officers, and we are hoping that the Inspector General of Police will take the matter up and, well, take the appropriate action. Well, at this point, it's time to welcome you to this segment of Nigeria 2015. I'm Charles Eruka, and of course, I am not here alone. I'm being joined by...
Well, I'm Kaide Alainde. Many thanks for joining us at this time. Charles, I'm happy to be here again.
Thank you, Charles, and I'm Kadria Ahmed.
And I'm Olumide Macaulay. Many thanks for joining us. Hello and welcome to Nigeria 2015.
Well then, for now, we can't have the results of the polls just yet. It's a collation time, but then, just like you know, we talked about yesterday, so many issues coming up. A lot of the maybe state chief executives, aside from Governor Amici, who was probably the protagonist of yesterday's affairs, today also we heard from the governor of Imo State talking about how he was personally intimidated by the military deployed in his own state, which also gives rise to the question, where exactly are the soldiers supposed to be? Are they supposed to be at the polling units, or are they supposed to be providing security on the streets? You know, collation is going on now, and then this is probably the most sensitive part of the elections, the process that will now give way to the announcement of the real results. And then if we are having issues at this point, then what exactly would be the reaction of Nigerians when the final results are announced? Maybe these are some of the things we should be looking at tonight.
That's not so much of a gray area where the soldiers should be, because it's been said that they shouldn't be visible in such a way as to intimidate voters in the first place.
I mean, I have a slightly different take on this, and I think this particular discussion perhaps is for the next elections, but I think we need to even start asking, to be honest, whether we need to collate votes. Because if we're using technology and we're saying that these card readers can actually send information, why do you need collating centers? Why can we not send directly from polling units results into INEC in Abuja, and then at that point, you know, they get put together and announced?
Well, I won't be the spokesperson for INEC at this time, but we all know that we're beginning to escalate in terms of our embrace of technology. We were told before the elections that the card readers are not meant to actually conduct the elections, but just to verify that the person who is standing in front of the electoral officer is the person who is already identified in the voter register. And I also think that the reason why these physical things need to be done is, you know, just like they say, you shouldn't just do the right things, you should also be seen to have done the right thing. So I think as it is right now, we're making progress, even both international observers and domestic observers have sort of given us a pass mark, but it still remains to be seen how.
I think what Kadira is
because,
saying
because
that
elections, let me just say this,
yeah.
because elections, you know, it's a process.
Yeah.
And so you can actually say the voting was credible and everybody is pleased with the conduct and the fact that, but if the collation gets compromised, then, you know, it puts everything up in the air. And so what I'm saying is that probably for these elections, that's probably too late. And we will discuss, obviously, issues around collation now. But I'm saying going forward, because we want to see improvement every time we go to the polls, I see no reason why we should allow any room for any sort of manipulation. If what we are trying to do is close all the potential gaps where things, you know, can go wrong, then I'm suggesting that maybe one of the things we should be looking at for the next elections is to say that once elections have been conducted at a particular polling unit, there should be a mechanism for instantly transmitting the results, which after all are announced there and then in front of everybody who's voted and chosen to remain, directly to INEC in Abuja. That way you don't have people in the middle of the night trying to, you know, do anything to the sort of overall results and causing trouble.
Well, perhaps, well, I think we've started, we've taken a step in the right direction. That's the introduction of the card readers. Remember, well ahead of the polls, there was this talk of electronic voting. As a matter of fact, there was a time when, during a sitting of the National Assembly, they actually experimented with it. You know, no one had to raise his hand or indicate by voice of mouth the ayes or the or the nays. They just voted silently, and the results were reflected on an electronic scoreboard. And so there were suggestions that it was high time Nigeria actually takes, you know, that quantum leap and adopt electronic voting. I think it's the step towards electronic voting that's been taken with the introduction of the card readers. I reckon progressively, as we maybe head towards the 2019 elections, perhaps we might perfect the systems. But then one thing was also instructive. A number of politicians actually kicked against the introduction of electronic voting. They had their own reasons, although, you know, from many critics, what they said was that, well, it appears they were uncomfortable with a system that would make the process of voting and then collation of results very transparent. People actually would prefer a situation where the system would be weak and porous and they'll be able to manipulate results in their favor if, of course, the actual voting does not favor them. So sometimes I wonder, or is it that they anticipated problems like we are having with card readers now, which is why they rejected the electronic voting in the first place?
I think we now need to begin to move forward in terms of not just begin to protests at results of election, but begin to protest when we see that people somewhere are trying not to allow a situation that would give us a chance to have credible organizations of things, elections or otherwise, and protest at people who are standing against allowing such process, just like Charles mentioned, to go through. Do you understand? So what I'm trying to say is that Nigerians need to be more vigilant and begin to defend the processes, just like we have seen that INEC has done and seem to have done. We should begin to move forward and defend this kind of processes that will help us to see that things are being organized very properly.
Back to the electronic voter that Charles mentioned and what Kadira mentioned about the card reader. Critics of the electronic voting system, critics of those critics will say they're living in the Stone Age because we have to move forward. But as you say, it's a step in the right direction. Technical proficiency is key, and that's one of that's something a naysayer will say, that Nigeria, yes, as big as we are we at the point where we can handle this sort of thing at that sort of level? Hence the problems we've had with the elementary use of the card reader.
Listen, how come when we are using technology in the private sector, we don't seem to have issues with it?
Very
you know,
good.
we do banking regularly now using POSs, using internet, we do
Yes.
online banking, and these are Nigerians that are actually conducting their businesses, sensitive businesses to do with money.
That's the question- that's the
using
question
yes,
that INEC should
electronically.
answer.
And so, but when it comes to our institutions, our public institutions, people suddenly start talking about how backward we are, how ignorant we are, and how we cannot handle certain things. I think Charles was right on the money. It is not in the interest of politicians for things to actually function to such an extent that we close all the loopholes. And
So they
here
want the
I'm talking,
loopholes to be
yeah,
there.
and I'm
Yeah.
here talking across, about politicians across the political divide.
And
I'm
so-
not, talking about any one particular party.
Yes.
But by their nature, politicians want to win elections. And in this particular country, if they have to rig to do it, so be it. And I dare say that along party political divide, you find people who will be willing to bend the rules in order to either keep themselves in office or put themselves into office. So it's about Nigerians and whether we are insisting that we have the right to decide the people who should rule us. And if the answer is yes, then it is up to us to basically make sure that the institutions that we have are strengthened and that we're able to put processes in place that are not porous. I'm not saying they'll be 100%, but we keep tightening and tightening and tightening.
And that's why the independence of INEC is key.